What is the scariest thing you've ever seen while driving at night? A fucking owl standing on the carcass of a large buck in the mountains at 3 to 5 am. All you see as you approach are two glowing red orbs, then slowly it becomes huge dark form standing on the edge of the road with eyes of fire. Then you get close enough and this massive fucking owl just gives you the death stare as you go past. You realize it was just a large ass owl standing on the remains of fresh roadkill. Freaked me out for the rest of the dark part of the drive. Someone I knew locally came across a Jeep that had just crashed into the ditch on a highway at night, flipped on its top, wheels still turning kind of thing. He was the first on scene, so called 911, and ran down into the ditch. The driver, who was badly mangled, had been tossed from the car and was dying. This guy held him, and the driver died in his arms. The weirdest part of it all was that he found out the next day that it was his cousin, but he hadn't been able to recognize him. Driving down at a lane divided highway. I came up to a couple semis and went into the left lane to pass. I did a shoulder check to get back into the right lane when I saw headlights in front of me in my lane. The car was going the wrong way. I managed to swerve into the ditch. Felt like I was mere centimeters from death. Thought my wife's scream would be the last thing I ever hear. And I never want to hear it again. The semis I passed all pulled to the shoulder to come check on us. Didn't see the car anywhere. I think they just kept going. Had to pull into a gas station after and collect myself. I was following a grey Toyota Tundra in a massive blizzard through Montana on McDonald Pass. He was going pretty quick most of the way, but must have been unfamiliar with how steep the final few miles are. He got away from me as I slowed down to about 35. Not 5 minutes later I passed his tire marks in the fresh snow that went off the side of the mountain. Pulled over and looked down to see his truck upside down and on fire about 300 yards down. Called 911. He didn't die, but was burnt up pretty bad. Sad and scary, and don't go 50 in the snow just because you have a truck or 4WD. An asshole overtaking a petrol tanker around a blind corner, coming my way. Scared the shit out of me. Whilst driving from Morelia to Ciudad Hidalgo, in Mexico, back in the 80s we had two ways to get to Ciudad Hidalgo, which was the National Road or the old National Road, which was called Mil Cumbres. Mil Cumbres basically means 1000 curves. That stretch of road literally had 1000 curves, so a lot of people would get motion sickness when on that road. One evening on a way back to my grandparents, who lived in Ciudad Hidalgo, my grandfather was driving, and he loved taking Mil Cumbres because it had really nice views and he just really loved driving that road. But since we had a new national road, not a lot of people use that road anymore, so it was kind of desolate with the exception of passing one or two little towns. It was dusk so soon that meant that being on such a desolate road in the mountains, we would be in complete darkness on the road with no many other cars on the same stretch of road. It took 2 hours to get to the town on that road, so maybe 45 minutes into the drive it had already gotten really dark, and as we were driving my grandfather started slowing down. I was sitting in the back seat because my grandmother was in the front with my grandfather, so I kind of stood over the front chairs to see why he was slowing down. That's when I saw a hug tree log blocking the road. My grandfather came to a stop and immediately started going in reverse to turn around and get out of the immediately. After we turned, my grandfather stepped on the gas pedal and I was sort of thrown back into the back seat. I immediately turned around to see if I could anything, and as we were speeding away, I could see men, very dimly since the light from the tail lights from the car were starting to get dimmer and dimmer, coming from out of the adjacent trees next to tree log on the road, with flashlights and guns. We were about to get robbed, and thanks to my grandfather's quick thinking and taking action immediately, we avoided it. That was the last time I was ever on that road. I had just finished driving for Uber and was driving down the access road to my home around 3 am when I saw a body lying completely lifeless next to one of those motorized scooters. I pulled over and flagged down his buddies who were drunk and kept going without realizing their friend was lying on the ground. Ambulance arrived and took the kid away, but I never came to find out if he made it. F***ck those scooters, man. I was on I-70 in Colorado going towards Utah, pulled over at a gas station at 8 p.m. Fueling up, I noticed a couple of attractive women pumping gas. On the other side of the pump was the man in his late 40s, just staring at these young women without notice of anything else going on around him. I walk inside to go grab some food for the next few hours of driving. When I come out, I see both the younger women's car and the older man's truck are gone. I decided to hang out at the gas station for the next hour to catch a little sleep before hitting the road again. After driving for a few hours, I was speeding heavy. I pull over at yet another gas station. The young women are there getting gas and eating some food on a picnic table. Looked like they had been there for a while. I didn't see any sign or the man in the truck, but can't say I was looking very hard for it. Well, here is where it got creepy as hell. Can't say I didn't stare at them a bit. I mean, they were good looking women. As I'm watching them leave, I see in the next parking lot over some headlights turn on, and it's the same man as before. He leaves when the women leave once again. Okay, that's a bit weird, but could just be a coincidence as there weren't many places to pull over. I leave a few minutes later and catch up to them. Now this guy's riding their ass with his high beams on. I decided to slow down and stay a distance behind the truck. 10 minutes or so later, the women pull over once again to most likely get this guy off their ass. With a sign of relief, the truck keeps going and I continue on my way. About 1 mile down the road, the guy just pulls off to the side of the highway. So I pull off a mile or so down the road again. Sure enough, the women drive by and the guy is still following them. At this point, we are out in the middle of nowhere and too many coincidences have happened. I called the cops to alert them, and about 15 minutes the cops pulled the guy over. I could have just seen too many horror movies that started like this and overreacted, but you never know. Better safe than sorry. Not me, but a friend. After dropping me off at my house around 2 a.m, my friend calls me and tells me to pick my doors. He said he saw a man standing in the middle of the road and that as he passed him, the man kept staring through him. Not at him really, but like there was something behind him in his backseat. He also said he could barely make out anything about the man other than his large eyes and trench coat. What really terrified me is that this happened on a street that only my family lives on and no one would have been out that night. Also, we are a solid 1.5 miles from the nearest neighbor. Freaked me the hell out. I slammed the brakes once because I saw a deer in my peripheral vision. Upon closer inspection, it was a mounted deer head on a stick in the middle of the woods. Slammed the gas after I realized that. I used to deliver pizza and often had deliveries right at midnight when we closed. One time, late at night, I'm driving back to the store through a small neighborhood. Up ahead I see something. It's perfectly spherical, bright / shiny thing, just hovering about 6 feet off the ground, not moving at all. I pull up very slowly. Still doesn't move. Still can't comprehend what I'm looking at. Just this shiny hovering orb in the road at midnight. At this point my curiosity has overridden my fear. I'm the guy in the horror movie who dies first because I just gotta know. Either I die or I get a cool story, right? So I hop out of the car and slowly walk up to it. I'm right in front of it and still can't understand what I'm seeing. So I reach out and touch it. It's a balloon. One of those foil birthday balloons with the street lights shining on it, making it look weird out of context in the middle of the night on an empty road. Dad was driving at night and I was looking out the window and saw 2 red pinpricks in the cornfield and it followed us. I told my dad about it and he said, in the most calm, casual tone for this situation, "Those are cornfield demons. Stay in the car and you'll be okay." Cue me freaking the hell out when he got out of the car not too long after to check a tire before getting back in. I'm still not sure if that was an actual thing or if he was using a situation to his advantage to teach me to not do anything stupid like that at night. Either ways, it worked, and I still have no idea what those 2 pinpricks were. This is a story about something that was really scary at the time, but kind of funny in retrospect. Once I was driving through an unfamiliar stretch of desert and mountains on my way to a campground in Utah. The sun had set and it was pitch black outside, We hadn't seen a town for a long time, which was fine, because we didn't need fuel, but it's worth noting here that, before it had gotten dark, the last several exits that had been marked on the map didn't appear to have any people at them. There weren't many other cars on the road that we could see, but eventually this vehicle came up behind me, clearly going much faster than I was. He passed me on the left, and as he went around me, I could see that it was a pickup truck with a lift kit. The pickup got back into my lane in front of me. He stayed there for a few seconds, then suddenly swerved to the left and slammed on his brakes. He then cut back over into my lane, so he was behind me, and switched on his brights. He followed me like this for some time, getting right on my rear and flashing his brights repeatedly. I started getting nervous at this bizarre and aggressive behavior. I told my wife to help me find a populated exit. The road began to spiral down a steep mountainous slope. What followed next was a progression of increasingly alarming road signs that seemed like they belonged in a Looney Tunes cartoon, where a character is about to careen off a cliff. These signs said things like, "Watch for wildlife, frequent wildlife crossing next 20 miles, watch for ice, watch for falling rock," etc. None of them would have been scary on their own, or maybe in the daylight, but at night, in a situation where I was starting to panic, they seemed alarming, and it seemed like they were ridiculously increasing in severity. At one point, a sign popped up that said, "Road damage." Since I was in panic mode, I remember exclaiming, "Why don't they just fix the damage instead of putting up a sign?" Eventually, we found a town with lots of lights and I promptly exited. I was terrified the guy would follow us, but he went on past me. I pulled into a gas station and that's when I figured what I probably should have realized a long time before. I had my brights on. Frogs everywhere, like hundreds of frogs all over the road. A dead, butchered horse laying in the road. Someone had completely skinned and butchered a horse, took the choice pieces of meat, and just dumped it on the highway. I almost crashed into it. Driving to work at 4:30 AM and seeing a cyclist with his head split open and brains on the road. I was fetching someone from his workplace. Had to go through some fields, and some parts of the road were dark. I saw a thin long object wiggling at an upright position at the side of the road in front of me. Totally freaked me out. I thought I was finally experiencing something extraordinary. As I got closer I realized it was a tail of a cow. It must have escaped from some field and was hanging around at the side of the road. The cow itself was black, the tail slightly lighter in color. That's why I only saw the tail moving first without seeing the whole cow first. A lonely abandoned shack with a bunch of arrows pointing to it, saying "Come in." 3 AM on a lonely road, and I was the passenger. An old man only wearing a bra, panties and high heels was casually walking down the road. My friend who was driving didn't believe me and went back around. Sure enough, he saw him and we were like WTF. I dropped my GF off the night we saw the Mothman Prophecies. It wasn't a super scary movie, but it had some scares. I take the interstate home. On the way, there is a curve where there aren't any lights, just a dark stretch of interstate. As I came around the bend, there was a guy in a black trench coat walking along the side of the road. As it was about 3 AM, I guess I started him. So, when my headlights hit him, he whipped around, and I swear he stared me right in the eyes. My heart jumped into my throat. The whole event lasted maybe 2 seconds tops, but it had my heart racing. Not paranormal, but definitely scary for me. A hitchhiker almost leaping out in front of my car on a dark forest road late at night. The woman literally popped out of nowhere. Had to drift into the oncoming lane. Luckily there was no one else, and painted median there. Read a police report that she ended up getting hit minutes after I drove by. She was intoxicated and running from the police. Pretty fucking creepy. I hope she's alright. I can't imagine what the driver that hit her was thinking. When I first started learning to drive I was working for my dad, and one day after work he asked if I wanted to drive home. I was like alright. So I got on the highway headed for home, and while driving, I looked in the rear view and a guy on a crockett was coming up behind me. I thought nothing of it. I was sure he would pass or slow down. I look ahead again, and a few moments later I hear this sound, like metal scraping against the ground. I look around, and then look back into the rear view, and the bike was on its side, spinning down the highway, and behind it, I could see the biker on his back, legs and arms flailing kind of like a baby on its back in a crib. Then I watched as he disappeared under the vehicle behind him. I was so freaked out driving after that I didn't want to drive for weeks following the incident. Then eventually got over it. Still I can see the guy in my mind just sliding along the ground flailing about then being swallowed under another car. I got off on my exit, and the whole road was covered in blood. I put on my brights, and saw a bisected body of a large animal. It just made me so sad. I was driving on a near empty freeway at midnight, when I saw a weird flickering light on the freeway. It was super dark and barely any lights besides headlights, so I slowed down a bit and merged a lane over. As I passed I got a good look, and it was a car absolutely destroyed and on fire. I was a little shocked and ended up driving a bit past it before I really saw what it was, and by the time I thought about pulling over it was already far behind me, and a cop sped past me on the other side, so I knew they were aware of what happened. I was driving on the expressway around 2 AM and a semi hit a car, and it went into the median. The car basically folded into itself and was beyond smashed. I can't imagine that person survived. It was incredibly sad and terrifying to see. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to consider the idea to maybe think about potentially subscribing. Peace.